everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday and the patch notes for patch 10.18 have been posted, and that means it's time for another patch note rundown. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes in this week's patch and letting you guys know what you can be looking forward to changes-wise in your favorite champions. Now, 10.18 has some pretty spicy changes to a few champions in here. Obviously, I'm not going to go through everything, of course, because that would take forever, but there are some pretty interesting changes here, especially in regards to the pro meta, but also a bunch of changes that will just affect casual play. So let's go ahead and start talking about things right away with Ahri. Now, Ahri is actually getting a bit of a revert. If you've been playing the game for a long time, you remember Ahri's old passive was just the, after she gets 9 ability hits on minions, her next ability cast will heal her. That is coming back because Riot want her to be more about weaving into and out of fights, and Vestian Grace was kind of hard to manipulate and kind of hard to use in order to have that sort of play style. So Riot have reverted her passive. Now her abilities add essentially stacks of essence theft whenever she hits something. She can only get a maximum of 3 stacks per unit hit. At 9 stacks, her next ability will consume the stacks to heal her for every enemy hit. Now, generally, you're still going to use this on your Q. That's especially why Riot put the ability on Q in the first place, because they're like, you only ever used your healing with the Q, but you do have options to heal off of the charm, which does the full healing because it's not AoE healing, for example, or your W if you really decided you wanted to. Meanwhile, the movement speed from her old passive now is on her W. So on activation of W, she gets a burst of 40% movement speed that decays over 1.5 seconds at cast, and the W will now do 200% damage to minions below 20% health. Now, it did take some very slight nerfs to compensate for its new power, so the cooldown is slightly higher than it was before, and the mana cost has gone up, but generally this means that Ahri has options to kind of dash on somebody, press W, use that bonus movement speed to walk away as the fires are pummeling them, or she has the ability to pop her W, gain movement speed, run at you faster than you expect for maybe a point-blank charm, something along those lines. So I do like this change. I think it gives Ahri a lot more control of her destiny, and I do like the fact that the healing is back to where it was before. It just kind of makes sense there, and Vestian Grace was just so hard to use. So I do like these changes. I think net is going to be an overall, not really a buff for Ahri, maybe a slight quality of life experience for Ahri players. Moving on, talking about Galio, just real quick here, he's getting a small nerf to his base damage on Q. That's just to reduce the amount of wave clear he has. Now, specifically, this nerfs Tank Galio, which is really disappointing because Tank Galio has just not been relevant at all since Galio has taken all of those nerfs a couple years ago. So this does nerf Tank Galio a lot more than it nerfs AP Galio. It does nerf AP Galio as well. You have to have more AP in order to fully one-shot the wave, but it does mean that in general his wave clear is lessened, so he can't roam quite as effectively as he could before. Our next kind of champion rework here is for Kayle, which I do quite like these changes, though I don't think Riot are going to have the effect they want. Now, generally these changes were intended to let Kayle fight her enemy laner a lot more than she does currently. Right now she just kind of plays defense forever and just kind of tries to stay back last hit, make sure she gets the champion hits on her Q in order to restore mana so she can stay in lane for a little bit longer. These changes are intended to make her less mana dependent so she can try and fight enemy champions more often because she doesn't have to worry about going just trying to last hit. So I guess in that regard we might see some changes. Now, her Q no longer has the mana restore on champion hit, and Celestial Blessing's mana cost has gone up. However, Starfire Spellblade no longer has a mana cost, and its missile speed has been dramatically increased. Now, the Celestial Blessing, that looks like a nerf, but really it's because she doesn't have a third ability that's costing her any mana anymore. So that's slightly bumped up in order to compensate for the fact that she's not ever spending mana on E. What this means is that Kayle will be able to poke a little bit more. She'll be able to look more aggressively to use her E to trade with, as opposed to always holding it to last hit, because she just has to conserve her mana as much as possible for as many E's and as many Q's as she gets before. So, in general, I don't think it's going to matter. Kayle is still not going to want to fight anybody ever because she's just not that kind of a champion. She wants to scale. She just wants to last hit. But it does give her a little bit more agency in lane and a little bit more room to play aggressively if she ends up in a strong spot where she can try to go for something like that. Miss Fortune's getting a couple of small buffs on this patch. Now, Riot specifically said they want to buff an early game focused marksman because, like they said before, they really want early game marksmen to have a place in the game. So the pro play meta can be affected by that. Right now, pro play meta is very much so about scaling picks and doesn't care at all about early game. So you can kind of afford to play champions like Aphelios or Kaisa because you're sort of like, their early game doesn't matter. No one can pressure us that hard. These champions are guaranteed to get value. So that's why Riot buffed up Caitlyn, and that's why they're attempting to buff up Miss Fortune. The problem is these changes don't do a whole lot to increase Miss Fortune's early game presence. They're just buffs to a marksman that is good early. So I don't think they're going to have the effect that Riot want. Now, the attack speed growth means that Miss Fortune is actually slightly better in the later stages of the game, as is the strut maximum bonus movement speed. They just don't change how well she performs in lane. They just overall increase her power. So I don't personally think these will have the effect that Riot wants, but I guess we'll see. They may have more data than I do as to how these changes will work out. In a similar vein, Rumble is getting some buffs here because Riot want to focus a little bit more on early game focused top laners. So Rumble is definitely one of those, and this buff is pretty spicy. That's an extra 25 damage on Flamespitter at max rank. That's huge. That does an absolute ton of damage, and especially as an AP champion. Rumble hits pretty hard into a lot of bruisers that kind of want to itemize armor in order to trade with. That really, really hurts them. That does make Rumble a pretty spicy pick for the top side. He still has the disadvantage of really falling off as the game goes on, but it does mean that if he can bully scaling top laners really hard, that it sort of doesn't matter because they'll never reach that point where they outscale the Rumble. In a similar vein, while we're talking about top lane, let's talk about Set. Now, these changes are all designed to get Set to stop having these sort of low economy tank and utility builds where all he really does is say, it's fine, I'm just going to be durable, I'm going to have lots of crowd control, I'm going to have lots of disruption in team fights, I do true damage, so you can't really even count on me to do no damage, right? Because I just ignore all your defenses. So these changes are basically designed to say, Set, you have to build some attack damage in order to do anything. Now, the right punch bonus damage ratio has been changed from a total attack damage ratio to a bonus attack damage ratio, which means that Set has to build AD to benefit from this as much as he used to. And Knuckle Down is in a similar boat where the percent damage of the target's maximum health now scales better based on his total attack damage. So again, Set needs to be building AD to benefit from these changes anymore because he can't just go tank and still have the same amount of damage that he did before. It doesn't really reduce his utility, but it does rein in his damage quite a bit and hopefully get Set into a point where if he does opt for the tank and utility build, he doesn't do any damage at all. One can hope at least. Shen has a very small nerf here. He is very, very strong due to how often he can get Kai Barrier up and how big that shield is, which really just prevents you from ever trading with him, so long as he plays it properly. So the shield value on Kai Barrier has been nerfed down by 10 at all levels, so it's a little bit easier to chew through that and actually make some damage happen onto Shen himself. It's not a huge nerf, but it is a pretty decent nerf for Shen to receive. Shyvana has some interesting changes here. The biggest thing is just trying to make the ability function as intended, right? We're saying that the radius on Shyvana, Dragon Shyvana's E scaled with her rank ups of the ability, but the effect wasn't represented in her visuals or the tooltip. So Riot just said, it's not there, so we're just going to take it out. Now, they changed how the explosion radius checks. Now it checks center to center as opposed to boundary to boundary. This looks very complicated, but essentially what this means is that the explosion radius is going to be better in the early stages of the game, so you're used to it not exploding quite as big. Now it kind of will, but it's going to be slightly worse than it was in the later stages of the game or at later rank ups, because this was a first max on a lot of Shyvana builds, so it shouldn't be quite as good. And it no longer casts at maximum range when you try to cast it near maximum range. So it will kind of still explode at its appropriate space. Now, as a slight compensation, the ground zone damage tick rate is half a second. The damage is overall the same, but just faster tick rates matter so much more. You get damage more rapidly. You can apply on hit effects more rapidly. Generally, this is still regarded as a buff, so it's not entirely bad for AP Shyvana, but it is a very slight nerf to AP Shyvana and a very slight buff to AD Shyvana. Talking about Twitch. Now, these are some spicy changes. They don't look like a lot, but these are really good. So first there's the E change. That doesn't really matter too much because it's just an AP ratio increase, which Twitch doesn't build AP really. He's not even a champion that builds like Trinity Force, for example, where he can benefit from that. I suppose Twitch could go for something like Ginsu's Rage Blade and maybe try to benefit from that AP scaling, but he doesn't really care about Rage Blade's double on hit effect very much, so it doesn't matter that much to me. The biggest thing here is the spray and pray change. The bolt reduction per enemy hit has been changed from 20% from the previous hit down to 5% per unit hit, and the minimum damage cap has been dramatically increased. This went from 40% damage to 70% damage. This means that Twitch, if you body blocked him with 3 targets in the current iteration, he is automatically down to his 40% minimum damage cap, and that's really easy to do. That's a minion, even just the caster minions got in your way between Twitch and his target, and now he's doing 40% damage with each shot of spray and pray. Now, if those 3 minions are there, he's only suffering a 15% reduction, which means he's still doing 85% of his damage, and even if there's an entire wave between Twitch and you, he can only go down to 70% of the current damage. He can't go all the way down to 40. So this is a big change. Twitch can be dishing out an absolute ton of damage in team fights. It's really hard to body block for your backline now because he's guaranteed that 70% of his AD. So this is huge. I know this doesn't look weird. This doesn't look interesting, but this is a big buff to Twitch, so I would not be surprised at all to see Twitch start cropping up, and especially like front to back fighting team fight compositions, because that's absolutely massive. So really, really spicy change on the Twitch here. Talking about Guardian here real quick, it's overperforming on pretty much every support. Everyone just takes Guardian because of how valuable it is and how much it can shield for. So Riot are trying to tone down its power in order to make other options viable. The shield ratio has a significantly reduced AP ratio and health ratio, so it'll be a lot harder to get those big shields. It will still be valuable in helping you to trade back and forth and preventing some sort of poke damage, but it's not nearly as effective as it used to be, so it either forces you to build significantly more AP or health in order to have the same sort of effect, or it'll force you to swap off of Guardian in order to go with something else. So I do like where this nerf is aimed at. Real quick, we also have some VFX updates. Malzahar, Nocturne, and Victor are getting full VFX updates. That is including their basic attacks, all of their abilities. It will be significantly easier to tell exactly what's going on and kind of modernizes them with the visual direction a lot of other champions have gotten. And this, of course, has affected their skins as well, so we can even see for Nocturne here, his VFX have a winter thematic in Frozen Terror, a spooky thematic in Haunting, and a sci-fi thematic in Eternum, so he is still going to keep those updates. So in general, that's going to be nice to look out for. Tryndamere has a very small quality of life change where he will flash when the R effect is about to wear off, so it'll be easier for both Tryndamere and his enemies to see when he's about to become mortal once more, so they can finally throw their damage back on him. And Ignite has a very small change here where overall it will have less noise than it does on live, but will still have better clarity and timing. People will be able to see, oh, I'm on fire, rather than doing the thing where you flash away and only then realize, oh, I was ignited, and die anyways. And that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know which changes you're most excited for down in the comment section below. As a filthy Kayle player, I'm really excited for these changes, but I also think the Twitch change is quite spicy, and I would not be surprised at all if we start seeing that guy, especially in solo queue. But let me know what you guys are excited for down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video just like this every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.